I'll edit it. We're doing the thing. It's
Yeah,
happening.
that's it. No, this is great. That's it. We're doing the thing.
Oh my God. Anyways, okay, so what are we doing? Okay, so we're bullshitting on camera on a
Yep,
Monday morning.
yep,
Um, Probably a lot about fencing, but also probably a lot about life and philosophy and maybe
yeah,
economics.
yeah. I mean, who knows?
It
Um,
happens.
probably some talk about, um, without going into particular and specific detail, raising kids.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
right?
um,
Our
so
children might murder us if we tell
yeah, yeah,
exact
we can't
specific
go.
stories about them on the internet. Like, that's not cool.
Yeah, yeah, but like, you know, yeah, exactly right. So definitely not detail, but more sort of like maybe our insights that we may or may not have learned from watching YouTube videos or like just movies,
Yeah.
or potentially personal experience, but we won't parse that out. So
Like, how many times can you try to show a kid an 80s movie that you watched as a kid just to discover how horrific that shit is?
oh my God, yeah, right, exactly. Exactly. That's a quintessential example of the type of kid-related or parent-related material that might feature in our weekly discussions.
Exactly.
Uh,
We were
yeah.
gonna, I think, start about telling stories about how we became friends.
Well, so I would be interested, not to
Not to
not
put
to
me on the spot.
not to deflect responsibility, but I would be interested in hearing your perspective on that. I certainly have my story to tell, but
Okay. So, all right. So we had met at WMAW, I don't know how many times until like I managed to remember your face. Probably a lot of times, embarrassingly. But I I've done that to a lot of people. Where people are like, "No, we met." I'm like, "Did we? Sorry." But um we fenced at Long Point something or other, whichever Long Point that was.
that would have been 2019.
2019. Okay. Oh yeah, that was the long point I was at for 24 hours. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, we fenced there, and um, that was like my biggest first memory of you in my mind. And then I don't know, we must have talked more, but then you invited me up to wrestle at your spot,
Mm.
at your club, and to teach a little bit about whatever. I mean, I did some von Baumann's and some other wrestling shit,
Yeah,
but
I was really interested, and so I had gotten to see your present. I mean, so I you've been a pretty public figure for quite a while, pretty public uh, historical fencing intellectual for a while, and so I've always been, I keep up with kind of the things, or I had been keeping up with most of what people were saying in a public way at that time, right? So
right.
throughout the decade of 2010 onward. Um, and so, but I was really interested by your presentation, the one you did for Long Point. I don't know what you remember about that, right? Because you have 1,000 presentations that you can give, but this one was about trees,
Yeah.
and I thought that was just the coolest thing that I had heard coming out of historical fencing for a long time. So I thought a lot. Well, and I wanted, and I had already been planning a wrestling weekend for years at that point, and I hadn't invited you yet, but I had already talked to like Keith and Tim, and just trying to figure out how to make something like that work. And but yeah, so having gotten to listen to your talk, and then we fenced a little bit, and then the wisest decision to like try and bring you in and build this wrestling weekend with you in mind. So, but yeah. So, all right. Sorry. Continue.
Okay.
I'm gonna have another cup of Starbucks that I'm gonna grab.
Oh, totally. Oh my God. Yeah, Long Point 2019. I gave a talk on trees. And like that, let me just say, I do give a lot of talks about a lot of shit. And like largely I run on the theory that I know what I'm talking about. And so I don't really have to be nervous about it because like nobody there knows more than I know about what I'm about to say.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Which isn't, I mean, isn't actually always true, but 99.9% of the time it's true, because you're even if you're talking about a subject other people know shit about, they don't know your internalization of said subject, right? So it's always something that you're the expert on. I am the expert in my experience of this academic topic or fencing topic or whatever. But in the case of the tree talk, I had been working on that idea since 2015, at least, where I was like, I need to understand these trees. And had been working and working and working and working, and relatively privately. I hadn't presented it. I hadn't talked a lot about it, certainly not on the internet, right? But I had talked to Jake Norwood about it, about this idea. And so he like, and it was kind of getting decent, right? I think I have it better now than I did then, 2019, it's 2021 now. But like, it was pretty good at that point. And it hadn't changed a lot in at least a year. And so Jake was like, shut up, Finley, you have to present this. Like, I don't care how you feel about your topic at this point, you will present it. This is happening. It's too bad. Get over it. And I was like wrecked with anxiety about presenting it, because in some ways it was super personal. But
Well, I mean,
in some ways,
in some way, yeah. And I mean, in some ways, it was super personal. Like it's definitionally super personal, right? Like that was the whole point. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. No, that was the point. Like, this is the way I see the whole art, right? And I think the way I see the art can be useful for you if you're willing to accept it. Okay. But, which sounds easy to say, but at that time, it was like not only presenting like how I see the art, but nobody else had ever written about this topic in fencing. It was like new, right? Everything else I had ever talked about had built on someone I saw as an expert. Yeah. So I could say I have this solid foundation. Yeah, whatever balm to my anxiety I needed, I always had. But yeah, that one, dude, I was so sick. I was so sick about presenting it. It was awful, but I did it.
Well, so what I thought was most awesome about that talk wasn't even how you saw the art, right? Like it had the thing about, and maybe now that I can reflect on, and based on what you just said, I can reflect on what it was that you were doing up there, right? It becomes clear to me that it was inspiring because you were making a stand about what you believed were in these texts, what you believed was important about what are in these texts, and how you're kind of over qualifying it or filtering it or running it past running it past the community or whatever, right? And it's just like, nah, man. And so what your talk was supposed to be was, this is how I see the text, right? And what your talk ended up being for me at least, but I think for many people there, was you can have your own ideas. You can have your own ideas about what you see in these texts, and I don't care what they are. I mean, I'm interested to listen to you talk about
Right.
them, but I'm not going to tell you they're wrong. And that's kind of, and it was a really refreshing and healthy perspective on what this activity. I mean, it led to all sorts of questions about what we're doing, and why there's so much baggage related to how we interpret and who agrees with us, and who thinks ours is authoritative or the best or whatever. And like it leads to all those questions, but it was also just the confidence that you displayed, right? Which is just like, and the other thing is, like, it was reasonable. It wasn't unreasonable. It wasn't like, this is what I believe and I don't care what you say. And it wasn't like an eloquent and accessible interpretation. It was totally reasonable. It made a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. It's probably, it's certainly correct, and as much as we can discern that. But that wasn't the point. And it wasn't the point for me, right? For me, it was like, you can be brave, and you can have your own ideas about this thing, and not worry that other people are going to disagree with you, or take it to the internet and crap all over it or whatever, and we should all just kind of get on that program. And I think it'd be healthier for our community to just all get on that program. And you said that in not so many words a few times throughout the talk, right? So again, like so I think it was inspiring, right? You inspired me, because it was like, it gave me the confidence to be able to say that I because I had been coming more and more disinterested in sort of the attitudes of the community towards what I thought about what was going on,
Right.
And so it was very poignant, and it was very germane to my life and my journey at the time. And, those parts of it especially. Also, the fencing was great, so that's always fun to hear people fencing stuff. But that was like that was the least interesting part of that talk for me. So,
Right. And like, I mean, like, you took away, from what you were just saying, like we don't have to worry about it. And my reality was, worry about it and do it fucking anyways.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Was my lived experience of doing that. Right? And now, like, since I did get up, presented the tree, as well as repeatedly, as you say, I think my final statement is, make your own fucking tree.
Yeah,
right?
that was it.
I think it's how I ended the talk. And also, that talk went way over time, but that's neither here nor there.
I think that's going to be a theme.
What? Yeah. But yeah, but so now that I've done it, it really is. Okay, all right. So now that I'm talking about it, I'll say this. Maybe what changed for me in that talk was I went from, this is the way I see the art, to, this is the art.
Yeah.
Right? Like, once I got past the fear of presenting it, like, in my own mind, and I'm not saying everybody has to take my art, but in my own mind, it went from, this is what I think, to, this is.
Well, and so I'll tell you why. I'll just relate, like, why it was so germane to my experience and my journey in that moment, right? Which is that I had been focusing a lot on, so I'm an amateur philosopher, right? Or at least I study philosophy on a regular basis, because it's just my nature. And I've kind of been on a lot of different roads, right, with regards to schools of philosophy that I was interested in studying, or just ways that I thought about the world. And
Right.
at the time, and really since for several years now, but starting just before you gave your talk, I was really drawn to schools of German idealism, right? So 19th century German idealist philosophy, Hegel, and then and sort of, and then also like postmodernism, just the personal nature of our realities, right? So like a lot of um, discussion and a lot of study on the personal nature um, of the truth of the world, right? So like maybe so there's various ways that you can think of truth, and this is certainly not what I'd like to get into today, but just like
Maybe a
I
little intense for like the first time we try this.
I had become very steadfast in my view, and I still am very steadfast in my view, that truth, capital T truth or lowercase t, I don't care, is just personal, right? And you can kind of explain that various ways, but the bottom line is like there is no objective reality for me, or if there is,
Right.
it's irrelevant, right? And so what all I'm trying to do, especially at the time, I've matured a little bit since then, a little bit. I hope I've matured at all since then, but I believe I have at least a little bit. Um, at the time, I was thinking like where our truth comes from is the functional relevance that it has to our lives, right? So we
Yeah.
choose our truth based on the way we can use it as tools to negotiate the world that we live in,
Right.
right? And when you have a frame, so you have it gives you a perspective to ground things in, including observation, right? And so this is sort of like, I disagree with the idea that you can observe laws acting in the world, right? So like, I don't really believe that um, you can discover the laws about the universe, because you always have to frame them somehow, and you have to frame them in your experience. So your
Right.
observations, your tools of measurement, all of that stuff come from the framework that you've built, the perceptual framework that you've built to be able to interpret the data that you're getting.
Right.
And so where does that come from, right? Because that has to come from somewhere, and it can't come from observed reality, uh, because you needed it first. So fit you can't fit your perceptual framework in observed reality, right? So that's sort of where I was at in my life,
Right.
right? So then, what is the art is could only be in here, right? Like
Yeah.
that, and not only could the art only exist in here, rather than being this sort of platonic thing that exists up in the ether, right? Um, it it has to. That it's it's not that it's different for everyone, but in a sense, like it's just a personal thing. So art is just it's a personal thing that, and then I've kind of traveled down that road for quite a while, but it begins there for me. And so like, once you accept that,
Right.
then you realize it's like this whole thing is a fool's errand, right?
Yeah.
Like to try and discover the sort of platonic ideal of what it is that we're looking for in these texts. That's totally backwards way of doing this.
Right. Because the Platonic ideal is here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only here.
Yeah.
And it comes from all of everything that you've experienced in your life.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
Right.
and,
I sat on this amazing conference last weekend, and one of the things I took out of it, it was about polyvagal theory, which is a whole. It's not a theory, but whatever. People use that word. Um, but it's a whole way of thinking about the states of your brain, right? Largely for the purpose of dealing with depression, anxiety, et cetera, right? Negative states of being, or things that we experience negatively. But one of the cool things I took out of that was To paraphrase, story begets state.
Oh yes. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
it goes in that order. It
Mm-hmm.
does not go the other way. And so this speaks to everything you're talking about the nature of reality and the nature of observed experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that truth is so deep. You know, like we talk about this all the time. I can't fence like you fence.
Mm.
I don't have your body.
Mm.
Right? My leverage is inherently different.
Yeah.
Right? Not that I can't learn from your fencing and should, right? And maybe take myself out of defaults and comfort zones and blah, 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 blah. And that's why we should always, even though the art is here and you have to find yours, that's why you still have to get out and learn everyone else's too.
Yeah, and you can learn from other artists. You can also learn from science. So I'm not like rejecting science, right? So
Right.
there's lots of value in science. Where the fact that we're having this conversation right now, that required like minimal effort, relatively, minimal effort, absolutely like ridiculously low effort. Like this requires nothing for us to just sit here in different parts of the country and have this conversation, right? And it's all because of science and laws and being able to predict things. And like, I think that's great. I totally love it, right? And I can use those things to inform my truth, right? So I can use science and even like a quote unquote science of fencing, right? So I can use ideas about geometry and ideas about physics to make sense, or to use as tools to help map out the way I experience a fencing bout, or the way I communicate what's happening in an exchange with my partner or whatever.
Right.
Those are all great, but it's just sort of coming. It's that thing. Story begets state. We have to just remind ourselves constantly that this is that these things about physics or science that we're so sure about, it's not necessarily true that when we relate those ideas to other people, that they're going to all of a sudden become better fencers because of that.
Right.
Right? So like, it doesn't matter that it's science and that it's objectively true, right? It's irrelevant to a lot of people, and it's not necessarily true that other ways of communicating knowledge or other ways of conceiving of the truth of the thing wouldn't be more effective
Right.
in and helping someone develop their own art, right?
Absolutely.
And so like, if me like ramming science down somebody's throat, and then you just say like, no, you're just hunting, right?
Yeah.
You're just hunting, and then that's your prey, right? And like, it's not clear to me that your way isn't better,
Right.
right? And so, and then if they don't take anything from what I said about my science, like all the science that I was trying to ram down their throat, then what difference does it make whether or not it's true, right? It's not a useful paradigm at all.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And that is, I mean, to quote Mary Carruthers, whose work I built on to figure out the trees, right? She says that, again, paraphrasing because I'm not going to bother to get out the book, but she says that medieval people were not particularly concerned if the diagrams that they created were true. All they cared about were if they were useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Our conception of truth is so informed by the development of science, in a post-medieval world, right? Like,
right.
And that's another thing that I loved about your lectures. It hammers at home, because you can see, so like, we'd like to say, well, they just weren't sophisticated enough, right? They just didn't understand the world well enough. We have science and we can know truth, right? And it's like, I don't know. Like, are you saying you're a better fencer than those people? Like, what,
Right. So I think we became friends because we could start trying to tell the story of how we became friends and end up talking about the nature of truth
Yeah.
before finishing the story of how we became friends.
You haven't even gotten like 5% of the way through the story.
Exactly.
Okay, so what happened then?
So what happened then? So
So after that,
I discussed the nature of truth at Long Point. And so anyway, so you invited me up to wrestle. Like that's what I remember. I'm sure we talked in between there various times, but that's the part I remember. And then I also remember. So that was what early 2020, February, March.
well, no, so we met again at WMAW after now that just that you're
Oh, in
saying
that 2019.
yeah, you're saying the date, so I remember now because there was a WMAW in 2019, and that was when you had a swan hat.
I
Uh,
did have it. I
we
do.
oh, it's probably
Come here, swan hat. Yes, swan
yeah,
hat.
right, that gorgeous thing. And
Oh my
so
God, it
we
is so good.
we spent an evening chatting at WMAW. You wearing a swan hat.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you were a little inebriated at the
That's
time.
possible.
Uh,
That's
I, I
entirely
wasn't.
possible.
I wasn't because I had stopped drinking that year. Still sober to this day. Woohoo!
Right.
Um, but it was fine, and we listened to stories about um, chimps and silos and crazy. Yeah,
We did. We heard some pretty crazy stories that night.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking because I was just chatting with a friend. We where we want to have a discussion about drum solos and their relationship with martial arts. And I was chatting with him this morning. I was like, I'm recording the first episode of a podcast in like an hour, and I'm sure that I would love to have you on to talk about drum solos and the relationship with martial arts. And now that we're saying this, like I realize that I also want to get the chimp people on to really tell that story. And I don't know if that's going to be possible, but like
I
the
don't know if
world
that's
deserves
possible.
that. The world deserves that story. I can't do it justice. Anyway,
No,
okay.
no, that story is a lot. So, so anyways, yes, that did happen.
That's when I invited you out. Was that
Yes.
evening?
hmm but okay, so I come out and it was March of 2020, right? Early March.
It was no, it was February. It was. I only know this because this was shortly after that, so I had to get on a plane. Yeah, and then COVID happened on my way back.
Right, right. Because that's what I remembered. Um, okay, because I had Alina Boyden here doing a 2 week long intensive. And the moment I wrapped up with that, I came to you. But we all got super sick. Was it
Oh yeah,
COVID? Who knows?
right.
Right? But remember, I was sick as hell.
We were sick.
And I
So
was
yeah,
like,
so we did something else. You know what we did? We ended up at the Met. We ended up
oh, yeah,
so we ended up I think that's really where we became friends,
yeah,
right? Because that was um we spent the weekend in New York City together
yep,
with a bunch of other friends, and that's when we really started talking to each other and becoming more and more interested in each other's ideas about
yeah,
fencing and philosophy and all this stuff.
yeah,
And so it was just happenstance that you came out a month later to teach this wrestling thing that I was putting on.
right.
But by then the ship had already sailed.
Yeah, for real. For real. I just remember, I remember being sick or Brian was sick, or Finn, like, because all of us got whatever that was.
Well, right, and that's why I remember Manhattan, because you were so sick throughout that whole experience. Like you were even getting over it then. Like we were
Yeah.
walking through the museum, and you were just talking about how you had this super terrible cough, and you didn't know, you were not sure why it was lingering so long, and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, I remember being like, I don't know if I can come teach wrestling, James. And you were like, fuck you, you're coming.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I should. And you were like, no, no
Yeah,
choice. You are getting on a plane if I have to fly down there and put you on the plane and bring you back. But yeah, and we wrestled. That was fun. That was a great weekend.
it was. It was a really great weekend. It was cool to see lots of different perspectives on historical wrestling, and it was cool to have a whole weekend full of historical fencers where no one basically used swords the entire time.
Right?
So yeah, I agree. And then and then I made you give the tree talk again.
Yes. Yes. Um, which is recorded and on YouTube somewhere. I suppose we could find it and link it.
I think it's unpublished.
That's probably true.
Yeah. But anyway, is the other one recorded? Is the one that you gave at Long Point, was that recorded?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
Mm-mm. No. And I've given a lot. I mean, people could like Google it, right?
Yeah.
Like I've given online versions of it as well. So like it can be found.
Right.
Also Patreon, duh. Right? There's a ton about it on there. So yeah. Okay, so your perspective. I told lots of things.
Well, so we're only in 2020 now, right?
Oh, that's true.
And so really so we had decided that we really enjoyed what each other had to say.
Right.
And so then we talked about doing a kind of more methodically laid out podcast, right? Or not even podcast. It wasn't supposed to be a podcast. It was just a video series that I think I had envisioned as being like 8 episodes or something of just like going through about, sort of, it's hard to say. Like it wasn't supposed to be about the Zettel or what we thought the Zettel was. Like that was going to come up invariably, but it was more like exploring the idea of your tree talk, which is this, what is the nature of a martial arts system, and how is it useful, and what is it in terms of truth, how is it a reflection of truth, and sort of really just putting all of those ideas out in a more systematized way. And we recorded, and this is like March or April of 2020. And
it was warm. I was sitting outside. That's all I remember.
Yeah. So we recorded one episode of that, and we made it like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, I think.
Right.
And it was great. It was just it was probably exactly the truth, the objective truth of fencing. And then like the recording was crap, or something happened with the mic or whatever, and so we just like, we'll get around to it.
No, we won't. No, we won't.
We didn't know, right? We didn't know any better.
Yeah.
But we sort of kept in close communication, just further developing ideas and exploring ideas. And then for me, what happened, or what felt like happened, was that we had moved so far forward that to try and capture it and put it out in a sort of a podcast form would have just left people behind.
Yeah.
Right? Or either that, or like if we had to redo the thing, then I would have I kind of would have not been interested in it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if I have the patience to travel that road again, right?
Right.
You know, it was arduous, but so much joy and so much happiness, right? It brought me just an unbelievable amount of joy and happiness and satisfaction and growth. But it's just like so now now I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna keep on growing. Like I don't need, we don't need to put this out. And at this point, like who's gonna get anything of value from it? Um, and so I I don't want to say I gave up on the idea, but it became less relevant to me, right?
Yeah.
And I was just more interested in continuing the conversation and being able to pick up where we left off, and being able to take all of these different roads, all of these different shortcuts and long cuts um, and so yeah, that's like it's been 2 years, and then we had the pandemic too, right? So because we had the pandemic, we I sort of my life was really busy before the pandemic, and I was able to just kind of diffuse a lot of that,
Yeah.
and it gave me more time to be able to go on this journey and experience this growth. And so, and in a way, I'm grateful to the circumstance for what it led to, right?
Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
but that's where we were at, and I hadn't even thought about, and also like I was making videos back in 2019, and I was trying to be more regimented, and then pandemic hit, and it really derailed a lot of stuff. So I just became less interested in putting out content or whatever.
Right.
And that's where I've been at. And
Yeah.
then um and so that but now we're here,
Yeah.
right?
We are. So I would say one of the major contributors to us becoming friends is we both like to talk on the actual phone. And I think you ninja called me as you referred to it. And I was like, yeah, done. Like we're friends now, like
I'm here
forever
for this.
friends.
Yeah, I'm here for this. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing that will probably worm its way into our discussions here is the current state of technology, and the relationship of the fencing community to that state of technology,
Yeah.
our personal relationships, um, and with that state of technology, right?
Hmm.
And by that I mean I'm specifically like pointing at social media,
Yeah.
right? And there's value there somehow, somewhere, right? But I think especially in the pandemic and being able to kind of disconnect and feel fine about disconnecting, because
Right.
it was an empowering thing, right? It was like I'm not, you feel tied to it, and then this is a great excuse to like untie yourself.
Yeah.
And so I've and yeah, and so like having relationships, in real life relationships,
Hmm.
has been beneficial to me, right? So
Yeah.
like, um, I feel like a lot of the relationships that I had developed online were almost soulless, right? It just, I mean, and yeah, I mean, I don't want to. This isn't to speak to any of my numerous friends that people that are really important in my life. Like I'm not. I'm. It's just the vehicle in
Yeah.
which I developed those relationships just wasn't making them as meaningful as they could be, and as meaningful as I needed in my life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would just say like there's a cooking analogy there, right? It's like a friendship or a relationship through social media is like eating something with too little salt.
Yeah,
Like it's just it can be super nourishing, but it's a little lacking, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Um I'm totally with you. Like as you know, I tried to axe the vast majority of my engagement
I
to
really, I
social
really,
media.
I really like the salt metaphor because I I never put salt on my food my whole life. When I was a kid, I never put any salt on my food, right?
Okay.
I never saw the I never saw the value in it, or I never understood what it was for, and I never really felt like I needed it. I didn't need it to flavor my food. Um, Except I put mountains of butter on everything that I consume, right? So like I would have so much butter, um, disturbing amounts of butter, right?
Okay.
Probably contributed to heart stuff that I'm dealing with now, right? So like, um, I'm going to expose myself by giving an example of the kinds of butter that I would consume. A
Okay.
Kraft a Kraft macaroni and cheese box, right?
Yes.
Up until fairly recently, so I'm talking like within the last 5 years, if I wanted to consume a Kraft mac and cheese box, I would have more than a stick of butter. So a stick and a quarter to a stick and a half of butter. And I would eat that with probably a tenth of the cheese that comes in one of those packets, right? So I would have pasta,
Okay.
a stick and a half of butter.
Pasta.
Yeah, pasta, a stick and a half of butter, and a tenth of what comes in those little cheese packets. And I would eat that in one sitting, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So
Fair.
that to put that in perspective, right?
Right.
So
Now, was it salted butter? Is this where you're going?
of course it was salted butter because the whole time I needed salt. I, I had no idea. I had no idea that my body was telling me like you need salt, you need to consume because you're not getting enough, right? And I was
Right.
like, the only way that I understood to salt my food was to put more butter on it.
That's
It-
amazing and
right.
perfect. Like,
Yeah, well,
yes,
that's what it, and I think that's where we're at with social media, right? Like our body
yes,
is telling us like, look, I'm starved for this thing, right? And
right,
you pick an aspect that has a little bit of that thing, and then you overindulge
right.
to get the necessary amount, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And
So I'm going to quote Lisa, well, not quote, paraphrase Lisa Feldman Barrett a lot because she has like dug into my brain. So she's a scientist that studies brains. I don't want to mislabel her actual title. I need to look it up. But her books about how brains work, how we create emotion, how um, just how our brains work have been amazing. So 7.5 lessons about the brain is what I'm reading right now. And she says in there, relevant to what you were saying, that we have a great debate about whether nature or nurture is most important. And she says, nature made us to be nurtured. And that is like where it is at, right? Because our brains require society in order to become fully human.
mm,
That is our special quality as a mammal, is that we form societies.
mm,
So freaking amazing. But to your point, yes, right? Like I over the pandemic have learned how much I love like human physical touch, contact,
mm,
right? Both me touching other people and other people touching me, like not in a gross way, just in a like loving sort of thing. And it
yeah,
is something I have always shied away from. But I have, again, what did I do? I picked up wrestling because I desperately need human touch, but have
yeah,
no like way to get it.
yeah,
So like my butter was wrestling. Yeah.
yeah.
And I just needed the salt of more hugs.
Mm. I think that it would be useful to throw a disclaimer. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
little late. It's a little late in the show to get here, but we might as well. Um, that anyone who came here for like a lot of sword related or historical fencing related like content, like a lot of data, probably came
Sorry.
to the wrong place. Yeah, we know, right? We're we're aware that that we've made it this far and not really illuminated the manuscripts or the art or whatever for you. That was not the point of this, right?
Right.
And
Oh,
so
we're going to dig into fencing. It's just we're going to talk about like the neurobiology of fencing. Sorry.
right, 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 and we're going to talk about like why thinking about friendships and the way that you can have a friendship in the 21st century, either online or on the phone or on video or whatever, is important to understand with regards to fencing, right? Like all of it is, and so it, and also we're just going to enjoy each other's company.
Right.
And so again, disclaimer, like audience members, this is mostly for us. We're glad that you're here. We're glad that you stuck with us, and I hope that we can provide you with some value. But also, like, this is probably not going to be too dissimilar to the types of conversations that we've enjoyed with each other for going on several years now on a very regular basis. We're just we're recording it because, Jesse, why don't you tell us why we're recording it?
Well, because if we're going to talk about like how we do fencing in the 21st century, it is the 21st century, right? What century is this?
Yeah, you're right. You got it.
Okay. What is time? It's been a pandemic. But if we're going to talk about how we do fencing, then we have to like, there is a huge gap in my mind in the kinds of conversations that happen online in the fencing community online that we do sitting around at events. But everybody gets real serious and thinks we have to be academics in a very specific, narrow, and a little bit tortured way.
So tortured. I think tortured is so tortured. I mean, okay, so I'm gonna say that I was to be at a fencing event.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that means being on.
Oh, yeah.
That means being on, and that's a tortured existence.
Fair.
Right? And it could be, and when I say fencing event, it could be a party that's tangentially related to fencing.
Yeah.
You know? And so one of the real joys of my life is to, and the other thing too is, and I don't know if it comes from social media, right? In social media, we're often on. You know, I think we're probably,
we are all branded, for sure.
Yeah. And so, and I don't think that's right for our humanity. You know, I think I've accepted the fact that most of our life we don't spend being on, and we're not supposed to spend being on curating other people's experience with us.
Right.
That we just, and so I jump at the opportunity to be as real as I can be, right? And to be as real as I can be, and to see what that yields, right? And I imagine that, and I know that it has been more fruitful for me in my experience, and I imagine that it will be fruitful to both give the conversations that we have to the world, whoever wants to take the gift that we're kind of presumptuous of me to regard it as such, but here we are.
Right.
But also to model, right? To model how one hears and discusses and allows themselves to experience change in their views, right?
Yeah.
Because when, especially online, I think we spend so much energy keeping up appearances, right? That we're inhibiting real growth in a lot of ways.
For real. Okay, so we're here to grow,
Yeah,
and that is us and for us. Other than we're going to let other people watch,
yeah,
and
and
maybe they find
eventually,
use in it.
well, and also like eventually participate, right? So like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. If we want other people to jump in, like,
yeah,
throw
and
it in the
also, well,
comments if you want to bullshit with us.
right, right, yeah, but that's yeah. I do think that we're gonna get eventually we're gonna get pretty nitty gritty, right?
Yeah.
So we both have a lot of experience dealing with the sources, and we both have a lot of opinions on what they mean or how best to think about them.
And
And
our trees do not look alike.
no, our trees are different. Um,
Yeah.
they share a lot of similarities, um, and in some sense, I was interested when I first had this vision for what this might look like. This is my 2020 sort of vision for what this series might look like. It was going to be sort of getting to a more fundamental, or at least allowing for the development of a more fundamental idea about what a tree could be, right? Or
Right.
like, so maybe we don't share the same view on what a particular technique looks like, or even its place in a system, but like getting to sort of like what a system is, right? Or that kind
Yeah.
of thing. That was sort of my, you know, um, I along the way, I think I discovered that I'm not even as interested in that, right? I don't even care. I don't even care what a system is. I don't even care what a system is. Um, except that talking about it makes me better,
Hmm.
right? Or it just makes me, when I say better, I don't mean like, we'll probably talk about this too, right? Talk about what it means to be better, right? You've had a lot of transformational insights for me about what it means to be better and where our desire to be better comes from, right?
Oh, cool.
Well, just like uh, we are talking about the ultimate self,
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah.
right? So yeah, so I think I've decided that I'm almost not even interested in an ultimate self, right? I
Yeah.
think I think it's being present. Being present is such is also a missing feature.
Right.
Or maybe it does exist, but when it exists, when being present exists, is after everything is over and people are it's like right before everyone gets super drunk, right? And so
Yes.
there's that small window of time where everyone is allowing themselves to be themselves and to say things
And
about fencing that they're not saying to make other people in the room like be interested or like I want to know more about that guy because he's got this cool stuff to say. Like
right.
it's just yeah,
Yeah. It's always the hug after the fencing. Yeah.
yeah,
The
yeah,
fencing was cool.
right.
The hug after, right?
Uh-huh.
That's why we're all here. All right. We should end this thing because it has gone long already. But
Yeah,
then maybe in the future it'll be, I'm going to guess 90 minutes for the
yeah.
future.
I think so. I would definitely I will allow in my schedule. I will allow in my schedule at least 90 minutes. I
Right.
think most of our conversations go on for lots of our conversations go on for 90 minutes. 90 minutes.
They go
So
out until like one of us have like a child throws something at us and we're like, fuck, okay, yes, I'll make you dinner.
yeah. Yeah. Right.
All right.
But so we should tease. We should tease. So what are we going to talk about
Always
next time?
love. Oh, okay. Well, we're going to talk about training in armor or how to train in armor
Oh yes,
because you want to talk about that.
I want to hear about that. I actually don't. I mean, I don't know enough. I don't have. My experience is so limited that the only, quote unquote insights that I have is sort of my a guess, right? My
Right,
guess.
but you do have a ton of insights into becoming athletic. And that's actually what's super relevant for
Mm,
armor. So I think you will have a lot more to say than you know.
mm.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that. We're definitely going to talk about systems more. We're definitely going to talk about the nature of truth and reality a lot more because I have a lot more to say about that and how that is relevant to Indus. Boom.
Oh,
So we'll get
yeah.
into that.
I'm excited.
And that'll
Uh,
be super fancy. But like what happens in what order, I don't know. We'll find out.
yeah. So I guess to wrap it up, uh, for anyone who's made it this far, um, thank you for
Thanks.
joining. And otherwise, I will see you. I'll talk to you plenty before then. But I'll certainly see you next week, same time, same place.
Yeah. Same bat channel.
Yeah, great.
Exactly. All right. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, I can end the stream and then we can keep talking for
Oh,
like
that's happening. That was already happening. You didn't know that
okay,
was
because
happening?
I have like 4 minutes. I actually do have to.
Oh, come on. Really? All right. All right. No, 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 no. Keep all this in the when you upload this video. This all needs
Yeah, all of this. I'm like, this is how we live. But that's the
it,
point. This is what we're doing here. Anyways. All
yeah.
right. I'm
Okay.
ending the stream
Yeah.
and then we'll see.